in the middle of a mound building investigation into who are the mound building cultures of the Ohio River Valley in central North America, Northeast. Actually, we have a lot of these mounds up here. Probably the most famous is Cahokia. How many people have ever heard of Cahokia? What?
Hard to play.
Cahokia. You gotta go on Google and check this out. Did you know that we have a pyramid, a base pyramid here in the United States that has a footprint that's bigger than the Pyramid of Giza? Did you know that? You know where it is? St. Louis. And there was a city there with all kinds of mounds, platform mounds and stepped pyramids. And there were over 50,000 people that were living there back in 1300. There were more people living in Cahokia than at London at that time. And they don't teach us this in school. What the heck is going on? And there's all kinds of cities within our continent that people don't know about. And so they were investigating this mound building culture, and they thought, well, gee, the thesis at that time was that it was the local indigenous people that carved these mounds, and we want to investigate this and see what we can find. I can tell you, right from the get-go, they're off on the wrong track. Because you can have a working thesis, but you don't have a conclusion and then go looking for evidence to support it. That's what they did with the runestone. That's what they did with the tower. They had an idea and they went looking for evidence to prove their theory. That's not the way you do it. So that's what they were doing here. And John W. Emmert, who was originally from Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia, was leading the dig. He actually did the excavation for the Smithsonian Institute. And at the mouth of the Back Creek, which flows into the Little Tennessee River, that flows into the Tennessee River, there were 3 mounds. In mound number 3, he excavated that mound. He found 9 bodies. 7 were aligned shoulder to shoulder with their heads to the north. And then there were 2 more in the southwest part of the mound, one with the head to the north, the second one, the only one of the 9 with its head to the south. And here's a drawing that John Emmert made. Under the skull of that 9th body with its head to the south, that unique individual, whoever that might have been, they found a bundle. Inside that bundle, they found some ochre stones you can make red paint with. They found some bone tools. They found some wood tools. They found 2 copper or bronze bracelets, and they found an inscribed stone. That Emmert, in his field notes right here, he drew this sketch, and he said, I basically found a polished stone. That's the first description he made of that stone. He said, I found a polished stone. Now, as an investigator, to me, that was very significant. You'll see why in a little bit. But I want you to notice something. You see this area of the stone right here? There's nothing there, is there? Remember that. This is the first, and so he collected all those artifacts and he reported back to his boss, who was Cyrus Thomas, who was working under the direction of John Wesley Powell, who was the head of the Smithsonian Institute and all of this archaeology. He's the father of archaeology in our country. And that report was published in 1894 in the Bureau of Ethnology's reports to the Smithsonian. And basically what they thought when they found this thing is that the language on it was Paleo-Cherokee. And it fit with the thesis. They thought, well, the local indigenous people, this is Cherokee land, this is Cherokee, everything's good. They were happy. They put all the artifacts in a box and they disappeared into the archives and everybody forgot about it, okay? Now I find it interesting that some of your people, Leslie, don't they say we didn't have a written language back then?
Right.
So the Smithsonian is trying to tell the Cherokee about their history. Why didn't they talk to the Cherokees? So this gets into this whole problem that the Smithsonian really did some damage back at those times. So anyway, it was forgotten about, okay? Until 1964, when a woman by the name of Henrietta Mertz, who was a Chicago patent attorney, who was doing research on pre-Columbian contact in North America. And she was in the Smithsonian, she stumbled across the Bat Creek box. And she looked at the inscription, and she turned it around, and she recognized some of the inscriptions that looked Phoenician, in her opinion. She then brought the artifacts to the attention of a guy by the name of Cyrus Gordon. And I want to show this picture here. How many people remember Argosy magazine? Okay, I can't think of it always had cool stories in it, and it was sort of science, but it was kind of a popular style too, but they always had interesting articles in there. Well, they did an article about the Bat Creek Stone that was published in January of 1971. The reason I'm showing you this photograph is because it's a piece of evidence. Here's some of the stones, this is some of the wood, some of the bone, this is a bone here, and it's got his name on it. There are the bracelets. This is where we can see exactly what the artifacts were. Now, you see those two scratches right there? This is when the inscription has been flipped around. They weren't in that first photograph published in 1894 or in Emmert's sketch, were they? So they had to have been added after it went into the custody of the Smithsonian Institute, right? That's my conclusion. Anybody want to disagree? Give me your evidence if you do. So someone with the Smithsonian did this, and quite frankly, I think it was an accident. Maybe they just wanted to cut it and see, you know, how it carved and see what it looked like. But remember that. Well, Henrietta brought the stone to the attention of Cyrus Gordon, who was one of the top Semitic scholars in the world at that time in the early 1970s. And he looked at the inscription and he said, hey, this isn't Paleo-Cherokee, it's Paleo-Hebrew. 1st century Paleo-Hebrew. What? Oh no, no, no. This is Smithsonian immediately jumped in and said, no, 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 it's a fake. And our guy, John Emmert, he did it. He did it. And you know what one of their arguments was for why he did it? I'm not making this up. One of their arguments was that he was a Democrat. That seals it, right? He was a drunk. He was all these different things, you know, anything. But isn't this interesting? Anytime something comes up that doesn't fit the paradigm, it's a fake. They don't stop and go, oh, that's interesting, let's investigate. Nope, it's a fake. And they throw John Emmert, who's probably been dead by this time for what, 70 years, under the bus. Didn't hesitate for a second, just threw him under the bus. Who'd they do that to? Oh yeah, Olaf Ullmann. He's been under that bus too. So the next step in the history of the stone, or the next age or event, was a friend of mine who's going to become a very good friend of Leslie's very soon. He's tickled to death to come down to the reservation and spend time with your people, who's a professor of economics at Ohio State University. He took it upon himself to investigate the Bat Creek Stone, and in the early 1980s he was successful in initiating a testing program. And this is a picture I took a couple of years ago when we were on a filming in a Ogham cave down in Kentucky, which was an amazing sight. It's a rock shelter underneath these rocks along a river, and it's a fantastic sight. But what Hugh did was he initiated a testing program, and what he did is he tested the bone and wood tools for C14, and the dates that came back were 60 to 600 AD, plus or minus 50 years. Interesting. The two bronze bracelets were tested. They contained the metals copper, zinc, tin, and lead. You never see lead in bronze very often. It's used for malleability. And the ratio of those metals to each other were statistically, and I've seen the data, so close to 1st and 2nd century Jewish bronze work in the Mediterranean region, it's like they came from the same batch. The only thing, and that was wonderful work, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. And of course, he's been arguing with the academics, and it's just been really, it's the same old thing. And so the last thing that needed to be done was there needed to be a geological examination. I've always wanted to do it. And my opportunity came when I got a call from her and her husband, who called me after they had bought a home, and they heard a rumor, correct me if I'm wrong, Leslie, about a cave that was on their property that had been sealed back in the 1950s. And so Phil goes out, rents a backhoe, he says, I'm going to find that thing, and he did. And they get inside the cave, and they find runes in it. Well, they get on the internet, they get me, she calls me, runes, psh, I'm on the next plane, right? And so we go down into the cave, and it's an amazing karst limestone cave. And there are runes in it, but unfortunately they're also associated with modern swastikas in late 1940s dates. I think it was some Nazi sympathizer who had an opportunity to express himself, and I told Leslie and Phil, I said, I'm sorry, but they're not old. Look, nobody, and she's real disappointed. I said, look, nobody wants them to be real more than me, but you know, they're not, I'm sorry. So anyway, then she tells me she's Cherokee. And I'm like, oh, the Bad Creek Stone. And so I asked her, and she tells me her father is the senior elder at the tribe, Donald Rose. I'm like, oh my God, that's who I need to talk to. So I asked Leslie, I said, would your people be willing to support me in an effort to try to do an examination on the Bat Creek Stone? It's your stone, came off of your land. So we went down to the res and I told them all about it. And one of the elders said they didn't even know about the Bat Creek. And then we talked about it a little more, and I think it was Bob Blankenship who said to me, that's another thing you didn't tell us about. And, you know, there's some animosity with our government and the natives. I don't know if you heard about it, but they kind of had a tough time. I think the word is genocide. Anyway, so they said, we'll support you. So that was an amazing story about how... So we finally, I knew they weren't going to send it up to my lab. So I said, no problem, I'll come to you. And so we set it up, and it'll be 2 years ago in May that I came the first time. And the day before I flew down, I got a call from the archaeology department. They said, you know, Mr. Wolter, I was planning on doing half the day with the microscope, half the day with the scanning electron microscope. Well, the SEM is acting up, it's not working right, you don't have to come. And I said, no problem. I'll just take the whole day on the microscope, I'll come back. I'm coming. So I go down there, and we set up. And you know what was great is that they brought in the registrar from the university, and he puts on the gloves, and they pull out the artifact, and they do this big ceremony, and the whole time I'm doing this, I'm thinking, I thought this was a fake, why do you care? Interesting, huh? So then I get all set up, and I got the stone, I'm getting ready to go, and then Leslie, Sharon Littlejohn, and Barbara Duncan with the tribe, they sent 3 witnesses, because this is a big deal for them. And the archaeologists, as I'm getting set up, you guys are all sitting right here, and they all migrate over here. They don't want to be near these Indians. And I'm like, really? I looked at them and go, you're going to do this? Come on. And they're like, oh. So I said, Leslie, go take a picture. I said, no one's going to believe me. And it was just this animosity, you know. So I start doing the thing, and I get all set, and then I looked at the senior archaeologist, this guy right here, Jefferson Chapman. I said, hey, Jeff, come here. Sit down. We're going to do this together. And to his credit, he did. He sat down. I said, okay, let's go. So we started doing the analysis, and I'm explaining things, and the guy's a sharp guy. He got it all. And so we're going through the whole examination, and I got to a point where I sat back, and I went, oh, I get it now. And I turned, and I looked at Jefferson, and guess what? The smirk was gone, because he got it too. And I turned and I looked at the girls and I go, it's a genuine artifact. You got a real McCoy. And they're like, woo. So I took this picture. They're all pretty fired. They were really fired up. They may not look like it, but they were. And just to show you, here's the back side of the stone. In Emmert's notes, he said, I took a prod and I hit the back of the stone and scratched it. Well, sure enough, there's a scratch. The impact's right here, and it trailed off like that. Again, I'm looking through his field notes. This is the only record we have to see, are there consistencies or any inconsistencies? Does the data fit? Well, this was one important thing that fit. Then I look closely at the inscription, and you can see at low angle light, you see these scratches? It was polished, just like he said, after the inscription was carved. Because these scratches go right down into the grooves. You guys see that, right? May not seem like a big deal, and it's not a big deal. This is simple stuff. This is called cross-cutting relationships, the law of superposition in geology. If we have a rock here and a rock here, and they haven't been overturned, this one's older because it's at the bottom. Pretty tough stuff. If the rock cracks, then you know that the crack came after this thing that it cut through was there. That's called cross-cutting relationships. It's not rocket science. but it helps you understand sequence of events. And this, now go back and look at that. Do you see anything in those grooves? Is there any deposits in here at all? It's clean as a whistle because it's been weathering for a long time. And I don't need to know how long. And you see why. This is one of the scratches that were made after it was found by the Smithsonian sometime between 1894 and 1971. And you see all that mud in there? Have you ever been sitting on a beach, a sand beach, and it's wet, and you take your finger and you put a groove in the sand? That's exactly what it looks like. I can tell you the direction of the scratch is this way. And it's full of secondary clay and silt. But I see none of that in the inscription. If this was a fake and Emmert made it back then, I would see some remnants, something in there. Nothing. And this is just some of the SEM shots showing you some of that material. That shot right there is a blow-up of this. And that square, this picture is a blow-up of that. It just goes to show you the secondary material. This is one of the grooves that has nothing because of all the extensive weathering. None of that silt is present. It's clean as a whistle. So here's the sequence of events. The inscription was carved into a dark brown iron-rich siltstone concretion. They took a rock, they carved it. The inscription was then polished, rounding the edges and the grooves of the carved characters. That came next. The stone was then placed inside the burial under the skull of that ninth person. Okay? The backside, the next event in the life of that stone was it was hit with the prod by John Emmert. And then the next thing that happened were the two vertical scratches, which were the key piece of evidence that convinced me, that gave me something to compare the weathering with, were made sometime between those dates. It's absolutely genuine, and here's my conclusion. The inscribed stone and related artifacts found in the mound can be no younger than when the bodies of the deceased were placed in that burial mound. That stone could be older than the burial, right? So it's real. Oh my goodness, 1st century Hebrew, what are we going to do? Well, when all of this happened, I got done and I presented my findings to the tribal council. That's Leslie's father, Don, right there. There's the tribal council. And they, well, the first thing they said is, well, now what do we do? And I said, we get the bones. Because in Emmert's notes, he listed he collected the jaw bones. And so the tribe was like, well, gee, you know, that's kind of touchy stuff. The remains of our people are the most sacred thing in our tribe. We really, if we get them back, we have to rebury them. And I remember I talked to your dad and I said, well, Don, what if he's not one of your guys? He goes, well, then we don't care. And he said, let's do it. I said, there's only one way to find out. He's awesome. I love your dad. So anyway, we did, and then, you know, they get everything, and they're going through to pass this resolution demanding the bones, and I said, you realize something, gang, they're not going to give them to you. And Tom goes, yes, they are. I go, no, they're not. He goes, yes, they are. I said, well, let's see. No way. No way. See, they already don't like me. This is stirring the pot a little too much. So they put in the request, the formal request to the Smithsonian. Well, so-and-so has been switched to another department, such and such is on vacation, da-da-da-da-da. How long was it? 4 or 5 months? Can't find him. Oh, isn't that convenient? Do you think they're ever going to turn those bones over? They've got all the other artifacts, but they can't find the bones. Are you kidding me? So, now the tribe is pissed. I knew they'd be mad. And they said, okay, enough of this monkeying around. We want our stuff back. So last August, and we filmed this, there was a meeting at the tribal council. You testified. Your father testified. And, you know, your dad and I have had a lot of extensive conversations. He's an amazing guy. Let me tell you, this guy is sharp. There's a reason why the elders are the ones they go to. And, you know, he was amazing, and he explained to me, you know, the tribal council is not unlike any other political body. I don't care what it is. People don't agree. And, you know, there's going to be some debate, and not every, but I think we can get this passed. Well, what happened? Unanimous. They are all pissed, and they said, we want to get this going. So they drafted a resolution, and now all the artifacts are coming back to the tribe, and the Smithsonian is not too happy. They acquiesced total. Before Chief Hicks's letter even went out, they caught wind of it back to the Smithsonian. They called the tribe and said, no problem, you can have it, which is smart. So, I'm not even going to go into this thing because this guy said so many stupid things. We interviewed him. He's an archaeologist with UT. And you know what is one of the clever little ways that they turn people off from investigating these things? Well,